because my position on the whole all lives matter thing in general is that it was started as a way for the racists to demean the notion that Black lives matter. And I'm kind of curious what your take is on the origination of the whole all lives matter thing in general before we get into the meat of, like, you know, our disagreement.
Well, it may dovetail in, but I believe that it is important for us to use terminology that is true. According to Scripture, the Bible says, when you know the truth is transformative, and the truth will actually make you free. So, if it is true that all lives matter, then that is a phrase that we should be using, and we shouldn't be beating people over the head with it. If someone really believes that all lives matter, I don't like to label somebody by their skin color. So I don't personally like the concept that there are black lives and white lives, that there are blonde-headed lives and brown-headed lives, that there are blue-eyed lives, but I don't like those delineations. I think we're humans. However, if you believe that all lives matter, then you cannot, by definition, be a racist. So I think the hatred towards all lives matter, in my opinion, if someone really believes that all lives matter, then they're not a racist. So I don't understand how someone going like, well, I think all lives matter is somehow racist for doing that, or that's a negative thing. I think that's a true thing.
Well, so you wanted to... Normally, the response that I give for this is that before all lives can matter, Black lives have to matter first. And I think that you'd have to agree that
that's my whole point, though.
Well, but you have to agree that the Black demographic in the United States and in other countries have been unfairly targeted in multiple different ways, at multiple different levels of society since 1860. Well, forever, really, but since the abolition of slavery, Black lives have mattered less. And so the formation of Black Lives Matter was in response to Black Americans, the Black demographic in America, being unfairly targeted by the police, being unfairly targeted by the justice system, being unfairly targeted in many different areas. So it's highlighting a problem that we have in society. So trying to replace it with, well, all lives matter, is just sort of trying to be like, oh, we get it, but we just need to not mention it because everybody matters, really. But if you honestly look at statistics and stuff, it's fairly obvious to our society that Black lives definitely matter less than white lives, to be quite frank.
Well, not a single statistic would bear that out in 21st century America, though I would agree that in the past there has been a problem. But in terms of systemic problems, no. But yes, there are real racists, sadly. But in terms of going like there's systems, I would say if you look at the systems, your problem, and even recently this was pointed out by a anti-racist, I believe he's a professor at Columbia, who said, white people are attempting to identify as Native American to get more scholarships. I mean, that alone, at least in college entry alone, demonstrates that that when you attempt to identify different from your skin color, it is because your particular skin color is not the one that's being helped. And I would further argue that if you look at 8A programs in the United States, a white male can't own an 8A, but a woman or a minority can, and they get special delineations of government contracts. So, I mean, you have examples of systemic racism in the United States, but most of those examples are the current ones are actually against white people. Though I'm happy to listen to ones against Black people. To me, if you're one of those people that wants to swing the scales back and forth, I'm not particularly bothered by those things, because I do realize that there were, decades and decades, sadly, that there were, but you're absolutely right, John. There were people that had black skin that were targeted. You can't use this restroom. You can't go dine in this restaurant. You had redlining. You had all of these things, which were absolutely terrible. And so to see a minor pushback, and that's the problem, is when you try to solve some of these problems, you are going to have some issues. So I'm not necessarily bothered that, here people are trying to solve some of these problems and maybe they went a little too far the other way, but it's not nearly as bad as it was, before. I mean, like I can go into any restroom, any restaurant, I may not be able to start an 8A, but, it's very minimal compared to this very significant level of racism. However, I would not say that police officers are targeting black people. I mean, there may be racist ones that are, but as a whole, I wouldn't say that is true. And the statistics don't bear that out. You're more likely to be shot by a police officer in terms of an encounter if you're white than if you're black. So, I've heard, I would love to see the statistics. I've heard that, the medical profession discriminates against black people. I'd love to see those statistics. I've heard those claims, but I've not seen the statistics. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to sidetrack it, but you asked, so I thought I'd.
I know. No, it was definitely me that kind of got the sidetrack going. I mean, I disagree with just about everything that you said there, Ben, because I mean the statistics show that the police.
What statistics? Let's look at them.
Well, I mean,
give me one.
To be fair, I didn't prepare like statistics on Black Lives Matter and.
Well, if you're going to make the claim, I'd like to see the statistic.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you haven't shown any statistics for me. You've just given anecdotal things, but I mean, you can look at
8As are real things. Is there some delineation I'm unaware of? Can white men start an 8A?
So for one thing, I don't know what an 8A is, but
it's a government delineation for contracts. And so if I want to go and build a building on a military base, the military farms that out to private contractors. But there is a certain amount of capital that is set aside for their buildings that if you're a white male and you own a business, you are not allowed to access those projects. You have to be a minority or a woman. And that classification is called 8A.
Okay. Well, so what I'm hearing from you basically is that efforts to try to equalize the treatment of minority groups in America is inherently racist against white people.
No, I'm saying 8As are racist. I feel like racism is targeting a certain group and saying you can't participate in that. I'm specifically saying I feel like that delineation is racist.
Yeah, but you understand that programs like that and other programs that exist out there are trying to ensure equal treatment in these areas. And so what it comes across
how
to
is
me
it
as
equal? Why wouldn't it just be the best company gets it? How is it equal to say if you're white and you own this company, you cannot, there's no chance for you to get the job no matter how good you are at it. That to me seems inherently racist by definition. Now, once again, I don't necessarily think that is exactly what's happening here, but I mean, you're still talking about a very subjective thing. Because are you saying that's not what happens with 8As?
I mean, I don't know 8As, so I can't speak on that particular situation. But what I do know is that the very many different programs that exist in order to try to make sure or ensure that people are treated equally and stuff like that are there to force this inequality, because humans, especially in America, seem to be inherently racist on some level in these particular areas. And so
you can't solve racism by creating more racism. And I do want to
I don't think it's creating more racism.
Well, if you're saying you're white and you're a male, so you cannot get an 8A contract, that is essentially racism. Once again, I feel like there's many opportunities available to white males, and I feel like there is zero equivalency to what happened to the entire to anyone who had black skin years ago. I'm not saying there's equivalency, but I'm saying that particular solution winds up being racist, and you cannot fight racism with more racism. It doesn't work. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, from my point of view, what I've looked at with the statistics on,
but you don't have any of those, so I wouldn't appeal to them. Unless you can point to a specific statistic you can appeal to, let's not talk about it. So just going like, I think the statistics say this or that. Can you just reference one, and then we can discuss that?
Yeah, I can. Hold on one second. I'm pulling it up. So there's racial disparities in drug tests and sentencing. Let's see. Just reading directly from it's a case study that measures this. It says drug offending provides an important case study because information from public surveys consistently demonstrates that rates of drug use are fairly consistent across racial and ethnic groups. However, the practices of law enforcement agencies and the courts have led to wildly disparate. I can't say this word. Disparate outcomes depending on the person's race. Black people make up about 13% of the U.S. population and 15% of drug users who are 18 years old or older. Yet, 27% of those arrested for drug possession and distribution, and 38% of those federally sentenced for drug-related crimes, and 33% of those sentenced by states for drug-related crimes are black. So this is one particular instance of how the law enforcement and the judicial system unfairly target black people in America.
Well, those statistics alone do not demonstrate that. What they may demonstrate is an income disparity. So the person that is able to, the person that's able to afford the better attorney is going to get the better deal. So if you're appealing to the public defender, or if you're going, so that could just be an economic disparity, not necessarily because they're black, that's why they got this particular sentence. Furthermore, I'd actually like to look at the study, but I think then you're assuming that every person is being sentenced because of that base. On those statistics alone, and that.
So sorry, Ben. I was pulling up the study for you, so that I could send it to you, and my stuff freaked out a little bit. So hold on.
We still got you. Are we still on, or did we get knocked off your channel?
No. We're not knocked off the channel. My stuff just froze up for a second there, so it's fine. But I don't want to get lost in this particular discussion because, like I said, I came prepared to talk about whether or not in Christianity all lives matter.
Well, let's jump back to that. But can I say this? My position on what we may call systemic racism, I would like to say this. I am really open to being convinced that systemic racism does exist in the United States. I'm totally open to that. And I also would say, if it does exist, we need to work together to end that. So, John, I would say I would hope atheists and Christians alike would work together on these things. And I'm really open to that. And long before BLM or helping the black community became nationally, socially popular, I mean, I've worked in some underprivileged neighborhoods. I've spent time. I mean, like, I feel like people say, do the work. I'm someone that very much is about that, and I realize that I do believe there is a huge problem in our prison system, and unfortunately, now where the root is of this, could be debated, but the reality is there's a large disproportionate number of people with black skin in prisons, and prisons have massive problems. And we've got to fix those things. I know that's not always popular with Republicans or conservatives, but those watching, you've got to understand these prisons are for profit. Some of these guys at the end of their sentence, they're attempting to trick them up so they can extend their sentence. All of this stuff has to end, and it is a plague because there's more proportionally black people in prisons. It is certainly something that affects heavily the black community, and it's got to be fixed. And left and right have to come together on this for what that's worth.
Okay. Well, we can maybe do another stream on the whole systemic racism thing, because there's plenty of statistics that I could bring up in order to try to convince you. But like I said, I just wasn't prepared for that particular discussion.
I'd be open to that. I would be I'd be fine to be convinced, because I'm not bothered. Like, it doesn't. I'm not fragile in some sort of way that I'm like my whole worldview is going to be crushed if that is the case. If it is, I want to know what's true about it.
Okay.